Matthew Perini, and I am Director of Content Development for Silver Strong and Associates. And I am very excited today to be able to speak to Dr. Ed Thomas. The reason that I'm really excited to be speaking today with Dr. Thomas is Ed is what we know and call a true math expert. And not just a math expert, an instructional expert, working in schools for over 20 years. He's really been on the front lines with educators, paying attention to the challenges that teachers are having, that schools are having, that administrators are having around helping every student become powerful mathematical thinkers. And he also has a long legacy as a math teacher, as a math supervisor, as a professor. And Ed is also a national presenter and an author of a wonderful series of books. One of the best being, and one of my favorite being, the book called Math Tools, which is 60 instructional techniques that a teacher can use and take tomorrow in the classroom to really make a difference in terms of math instruction. So with all of that as prelude, let me introduce you to Dr. Ed Thomas. Hello, Ed.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good, and thank you for being with us today. One of the questions I would ask is, with all of the pressures that math teachers face, higher standards, so much content, many teachers really worry about, are they covering the content? Are they fulfilling the obligation they have to the curriculum? My question to you is, in that context, how do we really make sure that we're developing what you call and what we call thoughtful classrooms? Classrooms that aren't just about covering content, but that are really teaching students how to use their minds well so they become better thinkers and more proficient mathematicians. How do we do that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. One of the things I'm reminded of is I've had teachers tell me things like this. They'll say, well, I've been teaching algebra and I've been stuck on the process of factoring for 6 weeks. And I'm thinking, gosh, 6 weeks just to teach the kids how to do factoring? And through further discussion, what I'm seeing is they're just rotely putting examples on the board, having the kids write them down, practice them. And if you talk to the students, they're like, we don't really know what we're doing. We don't really understand this. And so the idea of having a thoughtful classroom means that you're actually engaging kids in ways that really help them to develop understandings, to help them feel confident and to know what they're doing so they can get it done in an efficient manner. Something like factoring, maybe 2 weeks. You shouldn't have to have 6 weeks. And that's up and down the board. You'll hear elementary school teachers say, well, we've been working on fractions now for 8 weeks. My kids are still making mistakes. And the point is we have tools that will help kids to better understand. We have tools that will help kids see the relevancy of the math they're learning. We have tools to help kids practice in ways that they actually master the content instead of just continue to make mistake after mistake after mistake. And the idea of a thoughtful classroom stems from the teacher. So the teacher, they're orchestrating what's going on in the classroom. They're saying, okay, here's what I'm going to have my kids do today, or here's a demonstration I'm going to do, or here's how I'm going to engage my kids, or here's how I'm going to have kids collaborate today. And it's those decisions, when we make the right decisions, the thoughtful decisions, that's when kids really shine and we get the job done in an efficient way, an effective way, and kids excel. And so that's what I call the joy of teaching, is being able to know where you want to take your kids, and then know that you have a bag of tools that are effective tools, and you get to pick and choose what you're going to do with your kids. And it makes it into a really neat situation where you're working with your kids and you're seeing that your kids excel and be successful.
So, Ed, tools, the concept of tools, you've brought it up several times. When we're talking about tools, my understanding from looking at your work and also from our work as publishers of tools and developers of tools is a tool has to be something that a teacher can use to address a particular challenge and be able to address that challenge in a meaningful way that engages students and teaches them the thinking they need tomorrow. That's really the standard of a tool. It's classroom ready. So with that in mind, let me throw a challenge at you and let me hear your thoughts on how you'd select a tool to address this challenge. So a challenge that I know from my own experiences and from talking to math teachers is the challenge of repetition. I mean, you have to repeat and students need repeated opportunities to practice. You mentioned factoring being an example. Students need opportunities to constantly repeat and practice it, but we also know what happens if you just keep repeating. Students tune out, they get bored, and you talked about how it can lead to 6 weeks of lost time in the classroom because we're just repeating and students aren't getting it. What's a tool that you would suggest to really make practice and repetition work and hold and really lead to deep thinking on the part of students?
Several years ago, Harvey Silver introduced me to a model called RVD. And I'll never forget this. We were actually having dinner together, and he wrote this on a napkin. And he said, "Have you heard of this before?" And I said, "Well, no." I said, "Talk to me about it." And he says, "Well, the R stands for repetition." And he said that, we know that people need repetition in order to get something nailed down. Think about maybe when you were younger and you first went to school and they had a locker with a combination lock. That's one of those things that, you try to work it and you're like, "Oh man, I'm never going to be able to do this." But when you start doing it day after day after day, it starts to click, literally. And before you know it, you know how to open up a combination lock. So repetition is very important, and we know that from everyday life. But the V stands for variation, and this is really powerful. Harvey was telling me that, yes, we want repetition, but we also want variation as to how the kids see the mathematics. So whenever you might do a hands-on activity, that's a variation from the rote paper pencil method. Whenever you see a relevancy problem, say, "Hey, here's how we're going to use this math to solve a real world problem." That's a variation. When you have kids maybe work together on a paired learner challenge, that's another variation. The letter D in RVD stands for depth. So what does depth mean to me? The first and foremost thing it means is understanding. We really have to help kids understand the math they learn. The second thing it means is problem solving. So, okay, so you learn how to solve an equation, but what about a word problem where you have to read it, set up an equation, and solve the equation in order to solve the problem? This is critical. Too often we just hit the skill, and we don't go into depth. And so the model RVD, repetition, variation, and depth, leads to the tool task rotation, which is very, very powerful. And that's just an example of one of our tools that teachers can apply with their students to help them be successful.